Hello everyone, Mr. Boltri here, bringing you video 1.6, where we're going to set up the M&Ms lab, which we're going to run in our next class. So first, in order to set up this lab, we are going to show you a little video and ask you, while you watch this, what in this situation, what is everything you can think of that we could possibly be measuring in this lab? So as you watch this, just think, what could we measure in this scenario? One important thing to think about is what is changing. So now that you've gotten to see that, let's actually officially ask, what can we measure? And lots of people think of a lot of different things. This is just a small list of the things that we can measure in this scenario. So then from here, we should ask the question, well, what should we actually be looking at in our experiment? What should be our independent variable and what should be our dependent variable? So we really have to narrow this down to two of the most interesting things that we can measure. And one way to start eliminating things is just to think about like, well, what are things that don't really change at all over the course of the experiment? So like the size of the M&Ms doesn't change, the temperature of the room doesn't change, the table doesn't change at all. So we can wipe those off right away. So then looking at this, we might ask ourselves, well, which of these would be a good independent variable? Which would be a good dependent variable? And a lot of people really like to focus in on the experiment of number of M&Ms versus M&M color, because it's really fun to count the color, and then so we can count the color of all the different M&Ms. Which is a totally reasonable experiment. What's the relationship between the number of M&Ms and the color of the M&Ms? The only issue with that, which really isn't an issue as far as experiments are concerned, but as far as this class is concerned, we would end up with a graph that would look something a little bit like this, which is also, for the record, a totally fine graph. The only issue with this graph is we have to take a step back and look at our learning objectives, the standards. So the standards is I can graph data, well that's fine, but 1C is I can create and analyze an algebraic model for a linear function. And there's really no way to create an algebraic model because this is not a linear function. So this, while it's a totally reasonable experiment, is not going to be what we're doing with the M&Ms. So we can go ahead and cross out the M&M color as something that we're not going to be looking at. So then we're left with only a limited number of variables. So we could look at the number of M&Ms and the height of the M&Ms in the cup, which should probably go up through time. But we've already done something with measuring length. So let's actually look at, we could do number of M&Ms versus the mass and the weight of the M&Ms, just the M&Ms, or the number of M&Ms versus the total mass or weight. But we're going to focus on actually the number of M&Ms versus the mass. So now that we've focused in on our independent variable and our dependent variable, we can pull out our lab notebooks and start the lab setup process. So you're going to need 2 pages that are side by side, ideally, just so we can do the whole lab on those 2 pages. And then at the top of the very left, I want you to title it M&Ms lab. And then we have to write down our question for the lab. So for this lab, given the independent variable and dependent variable, what is our question going to be? And our questions are going to take the same form over pretty much the entire year. It's going to be, what is the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable? In this situation, it's the number of M&Ms and the total mass as we add M&Ms to the cup. So once you get that question down, you can draw a sketch. And some things that you're going to need to include in your sketch are the M&Ms, the cup, and some way to record the total mass. In this situation, it's going to be the electronic bounce is how we're going to be recording the mass. After you're done with your sketch, you're going to want to put in a procedure. So I'm actually not going to give you the procedure for this one. I want you to write a procedure for yourself. And remember, to be more specific, do not say record data. You have to be specific to say what you are recording, when, and how. So write your own procedure. And then, before we are ready to run our lab, we have to set up our data table. So remember, we're not just like writing data all over the place. We want a very organized data table ahead of time. So we're going to set up our data table with two columns with, since this is a pretty simple experiment, we're going to have the number of M&Ms on the right and the total mass on the left. Here I have mass, but I should probably say total mass. And then you're going to want to make sure you have at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 places to put 8 different pieces of information, because 8, as far as we're running experiments, 8 is great. Once you get that done, you can just go ahead and make sure you leave a space for your graph and your graphical interpretation over on the right. And we should be ready to come to class, next class, and run the M&Ms lab. So let me know if you have any questions. And I'm so looking forward to doing this lab with you in our next class in person. And I'll see you then. Go Bears.